name is Tla-o-qui-aht. We're in Tla-o-qui-aht territory here. Originally, though, Paneet, which is on the rear of Mears Island, they call Mears Island. My family comes from there, and come from Chief's house there. My ancestors are chiefs of Paneet. I'm a now at this age master carver of the family and the tribe, Tla-o-qui-aht and Paneet. I was born to do this. When I was born, my father's mother received me and then introduced me to my parents and told them that I was going to be an artist and a carver. So I grew up with that, and I didn't know that until my dad was ready to die, and I was already a practicing artist. He told me that, so I didn't know that. I didn't know that at all. But my parents were. My father was a carver. He actually came from a canoe builder family. They were professional canoe builders. What you now call the Davids, or the David family, Paneet, chiefs of Paneet. But we were a carver. My dad was a carver, singer and dancer, and my mom was a painter. So I grew up around it, even though it wasn't traditional like you're going to see here today. But the great thing about being raised by those traditional people was that they knew everything about what these represented and how it related to us as a people, as a culture. They knew the relationship between us and Thunderbird and Bear, Killuel, and I grew up with that, and that's really important. It was really important to me. I started studying it professionally about over 50 years ago. I was a young man, and at that time living in Seattle, and luckily there was some really good teachers there. They were not native, but they were amazing teachers and artists. And they encouraged me, even though they did mostly northern stuff, they encouraged me to focus on Nuu-chah-nulth art, the art of my people, to study it and to practice it. And I was really grateful for that. And right off the bat, like my teacher's name was Dwayne Pasco, he was at the time doing a lot of Tsimshan stuff. He was even a teacher at Kasan, that school that started there. But he, when he sat down with me and he was going to help me study Nuu-chah-nulth art, there was only a few books available at that time in the late 60s. And luckily there was pictures of some Nuu-chah-nulth art. And this screen is, this is a better visual of it. It's almost a direct copy of this painted cedar screen, which came from my mother's grandfather's house, my great-grandfather's house in Nuu-chah-nulth, which is Somas River, Tsumaas in Port Alberni. This big longhouse was on the river there, and we have a picture of my mom standing, as a little girl standing in front of this painting here on a big cedar board. It must be about 6 feet tall, maybe. It's now in New York City Museum there. But my teacher, Dwayne, when we started to look at Nuu-chah-nulth art, brought this up and looked at it, and he thought for a while, and he said, you know what I think? He said, I think when people are going to do this painting, I think they just walked right up to it with their brush and paint and said, oh, I want to have my whale here, and I want to put the Thunderbird here. Whereas he's teaching of the northern stuff, it's really structured with what they call ovoids and U's, and it's really methodical structure. But he said, I think your people just walked up to him. And that was pretty much, I think, overall for all the old timers, because they didn't have pencils and paper like we have pencils and paper, and we get to work our ideas out in these sketches and then blow it up. But they didn't have that, and they had these massive walls and massive areas to paint. Nuu-chah-nulth art is much freer than the northern style, like the Haida and the Tsimshian. They have that structure, ovoid U's. It's Robert Davidson calls it the alphabet, for lack of traditional words. Whereas Nuu-chah-nulth is really free in form, and probably pre-contact it was more free of any northern influence, but there was always influence anyway. Over hundreds and thousands of years, there was communication between all the tribes. My dad talks about going to potlatch in Bella Bella, for instance, on northern painters. So there was always that chance to see and then to be influenced and emulate. And left alone, it got more and more so. Like this, this drum was painted by my nephew cousin Arthur Thompson. Arthur Thompson, Rhonda Hamilton, Tim Paul, and myself started 50 years ago, 50s plus, carving and designing. And Arthur, unfortunately he's gone now, but over the span of his, what we call now, art career, he developed a real personal style that was an incredible combination of Nuu-chah-nulth shapes, and then adding influence by like northern. You can see where this could be considered a northern structure, ovoid, and this is a really strong northern influence. And he's, I think, more than like Ron and I, me especially, he developed a style that was really identifiable. This one is mine. This one is Ron Hamilton's, and that's mine. Of course, I wanted to represent my ancestor. Ron has always tried to design in a real old style. His only influence is that when he first started, he was working with Tony Hunt and Henry Hunt at the museum in Victoria. So, especially to begin with, you could see real Quina influence. And mine, I do a lot of things that were influenced by Tsimshian and Haida because of Bill Ohm. But over time, I developed, I guess, what's my style. I never saw myself as developing Joe David's style. I never thought I had a style, but people that have art knowledge and sense would say, oh, sure you do. I can recognize your stuff anywhere. You got a style. So, oh, okay. And part of the reason that I never really thought I had a style was I've always saw myself as learning and developing. I've always been my personal hardest critic. Three-dimensional stuff, carving. Nuu-chah-nulth, when we first started, me and Arthur and Ron, and was like, I've never been able to, my teachers were really good, like Bill and Dwayne. When they I remember when I first saw them, when they start talking about our masks, for instance, they said, "Oh, it's built on this V shape. It's really deep, and it's this V shape. It's really deep and pointy, whereas the northern things are more round." And when we started out, this was done by Arthur Thompson a long time ago. I'm going to guess in the 70s. We were really building on that V shape and really shallow, hardly any sculpture. But over time, it developed into more where it's not a real V. It's a crown. It's a soft, beautiful crown, and all the old ones are like that. This is actually an almost direct copy of a mask made here over 100 years ago by a friend of mine, and you'll see that they're really subtle. What makes it well, this and this is distinctly Tla-o-qui-aht, things that were made here over 100 years ago. I'd have to show you a number of examples to tell you what makes it Tla-o-qui-aht compared to others. And in a particular period, the things that were made 100 years ago are different from the things that were made 200 years ago. And when you studied, you can see the development. You can see the beginnings of, like for instance, this one. This is an old one. I bought this at an auction, and I did a little restoration on parts of it. That's why parts of it looks kind of new. But it's an old Nuu-chah-nulth mask, and I'm going to guess that it was made up north, maybe Nuu-chah-nulth. But it's structured, you'd say it looks a lot like these, and it does, but you see in this really old one, it's a style over 150 years ago, where you see this distinct step, this line, and this step in the nose, this plane and this plane is different from this cheek plane, whereas in another 50 years, 75 years, these steps have just been, it's more soft and sculptured. And there's a lot of old ones from Nuu-chah-nulth that this is really pronounced, these separate planes. So there's development over time.
With these planes, with the, I'm just going to call them Puckmas, the one on the end, would that be following, like go forward 50 or 70 years in your observation, your opinion, would that be the next era of it evolving, of that plane on this one here? Yeah, going from this plane here to the deeper next, would that be, in your opinion, maybe the next fast forward 70 years, 50 years, 70 years of that becoming more the signature style? I guess I'm asking as a student, right?
Is this come later than that's over here?
Because that, to me, that's more a real signature. Those over there are real signature styles of Nuu-chah-nulth. This is as well, but
There's no set that's A, that's B, and that's C, but you can definitely tell the really old things are going to be a lot with these planes. At the same time, you're gonna have that eliminated. For instance, in this is stylistically, for instance, at the time of Captain Cook, where this one is more 1800s. early 1800s, 1850, 18, you know, kind of like that. But the reason that this is soft and not so angular as that is that this was really meant to portray a specific human being. These things, there's a number of old ones that were collected, especially by the first Captain Cook and those guys, 1790, and they were actually gifted as well. The quina Wiccan shows people gifted these things. These things represent decapitated heads. When they went to war and killed people, they would take the head, especially if it was a revered enemy, a revered enemy chief, someone really important. They would take that head and take it home and display it. And I think, no one told me that, I'm willing to bet that these were carved to represent actual heads. The head would decompose and rot, and they would have to deal with that, dispose of it. But the whole trophy, war trophy, would be displayed in a carved form to tell the story of that victorious chief. It would be a specific person. So anyway, I think it's really soft. It doesn't have those because it's like a portrait. And this is what this is as well, my son's. It's not a dance mask, like these are dance masks with the hole. It's a head.
Which I've seen you portray one. I've seen one about 4 or 5 years ago that you were portraying this one, and you had it titled "Revered Ancestor."
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a friend of mine. She gave me her hair, so I carved a portrait of her. This represents Anna May. That's whose hair is. But although it's like a portrait mask, it's carved in Nuu-chah-nulth style, and then more specific Tla-o-qui-aht style. And it's difference between a mask like this and a mask like that is that this has an orb, where Nuu-chah-nulth seldom had that. Yeah. The eye was always on the cheek plane.
Which I've noticed you've done that on a number of your pieces over the years. That orb, that slight orb.
I have my real mission still, even though I'm now a great accomplished artist and everything else, I'm still striving to make for me, ultimate decapitated head. My family calls us welcome mask because we have a song and dance to go with this mask. So I call it that, a welcome mask, to make the ultimate that. And then this guy is the wild man of the woods, which doesn't translate as wild man of the woods, but in English he's always described as that. The most powerful old one that I've seen is on display at the museum in Victoria, the Royal Museum, and they said it was collected in Berkeley Sound, and it's just, there's no doubt in your mind that this is a wild man, in other words, what he represents. But it's really old. If I'm going to guess when it was made, I'm going to say maybe 200 years ago. And it's just got magnificent power. The carver wasn't the refined carver that say would possibly make something like this, but he had power, personal power, and it translated into his mask. All of these things, these paintings. This is a screen on canvas that belonged to a family in Nuu-chah-nulth. And someone even gave us a name, said, "Oh, Chilet's made that Nuu-chah-nulth guy," and I believed that for a while. But after I started studying Nuu-chah-nulth art, and specifically Tla-o-qui-aht, this is definitely a Tla-o-qui-aht artist. I can show you examples, including this, which is a model in Chicago. It's that same artist, and this was made earlier than this. This is a painting on wood, but you can see that it's the same. And then he carved these poles, and I have examples of his carvings that will show you that the same hand made those. So it's that same artist. So anyway, it's Tla-o-qui-aht. But the power that you see accomplished here comes from those artists had power. They lived this. They had a relationship with whales, a powerful relationship with whales. They had powerful relationship with the supernatural, which is like the Thunderbird, and that also represents the chief. All of this stuff represents the chiefs, but they had relationship with this lifestyle, an active relationship, and they lived in an environment that was powerful and pristine. Everything they drank and ate was thick with power, and that gave them power. From birth to death, from dawn to dusk, they were living this power. And you know that these people, when they express themselves, it's going to be powerful. They lived in a beautiful, balanced environment and culture, so that their muscle memory, their muscle grace was all of this was automatic, what people now call automatic writing. We have to struggle. I had to struggle to do this. I had to struggle like hell because I didn't have the same power as them. I grew up with, well, I was raised on a pits with no electricity, no plumbing like that, but soon after that, in my teen years, it was full-blown 20th century. So the power is like this, even though this is really wild looking, it has barely that smidgen of the power of the old one was, because I barely have this power of that as the person that made the old one. My son made this. He was born in '71, and he's unnatural, obviously. He hit the shop running, and he's much better at the beginning than I was. My stuff when I first started 50 years ago was awful, but I stayed with it. And when someone asks me for, oh, I want to be a carver, oh, I want to be an artist, I want to be a carver, the first thing I always tell them is, well, you better learn how to make tools, and then you better learn how to sharpen them and maintain them. People think, oh, I can buy that. I want to carve. I want to be a painter. So, well, you better start drawing. All my life, but especially for the last 50 years I've been doing this, I've done thousands of drawings, doodles, over and over. I do these ideas, constantly drawing. I have tons of drawings at home. Some have been discarded because they're just too much. But like all professional artists do that. Dancers, singers, pianists, they all practice. Every day they do something. Calligraphy, this is calligraphy. I've heard a story of Chinese calligraphers, Asian calligraphers, where they'll practice this one character, they call them, all day long. They'll do it all day long. And at the end of the day, the masterpiece, it's natural. That's practice. And it also talks to muscle memory. When I first started, my body, my muscles had, there was no communication. My mind knew what it wanted to do. I could see the old things. I knew what I wanted to do, but my body didn't know what the hell I was talking about. It couldn't do it. But you stay at it, you practice. And luckily, of all my life, I've also been, because my father was a singer and a dancer. And singing is that rhythm. Singing is this same thing in a different form. The sounds is the same thing in a different form. Color, balance, grace, harmony. And dancing is the same thing as all these shapes in a different form. So luckily I had that. My body, I wasn't this stiff person. I had that going for me. But loving to draw ever since I was a tiny little thing, that also over and over and over and over and over and over and over until, and some days are better than others. Some days I can't do it, and then I'll say, okay, can't do that now. I'll go do something else. I won't force myself. I won't make myself make something ugly. If I can't do it, I'm not going to do it. And then there's other days where it's magic. It just comes out. That's where I'll call it automatic writing or something. We're doing a design. There it is. And also, like culture in the past. See, all of this is history, family history. It's not made up. All this represents human experience in a family, in a line, in a lineage. It's my dad used to call it coat of arms. See, like that word, it's coat of arms, but it's a storyline. When I carved that pole for the township 3 years ago, no, Jesus, and we dedicated and had that thing at the hall. I started by saying, first I addressed my people. I told them, "Witsexas koa." That means I can't speak our language properly. I'm bum at it, at speaking our language. I'm bum at it. And then I told them, I said, my uncle Dan David was an orator. He spoke for the chiefs. He's the one that stood in front of our chief's screen, the Frank family, at potlatches, and told the people at the gathering the story of all this, what this is saying about the chiefs. This talks who the chiefs are. And he spoke in a very formal protocol language, not everyday language of our people when they're talking. That's easy to understand, but when he started, it was a whole completely different thing. But he was raised to do that. His grandpa was a historian and orator, and he could do that. And I can't do that, and I won't pretend to or try to ever. But when I talk about the chiefs, I talk about them this way. I carve and I paint. And I'm going to do it as best I can and as traditionally as I can, just like my uncle did in his oratory. Just like the singers and dancers do it, the way it came down over the centuries when they're singing and dancing, representing their family as best they can. That's what motivates me to do this. And a lot of it is in my career, a journal even of my life. One time a friend in Vancouver in the 80s wanted to do a thesis called The Shamanic Shamanism in Work of Joe David. And she said, do you have pictures of your stuff? Yeah, I gave her all my slides. And then she'd get together, man, she'd show, and said, oh, can you tell me what this is and when you made it? And I would tell her exactly when I made it, and over decades. And she said, wow, that's amazing. How can you remember that? She says, well, when I see each piece, I remember exactly when I made it. I remember exactly what was going on in my life. It's documentation of my life. And this is my drum. This is my cousin Arthur's, my cousin Ron Hamilton. And this is my drum. And it's a whale. I spent from the mid-70s to early 90s on an island out here called Nuu-chah-nulth, and it was the whaling village site of my people. The chiefs lived there that were whalers. So it's just steeped in that energy and history. So my great grandfather from Panit had a house out there. So I developed a relationship with the whales out there. So I have this really fluid way of doing it that's really personal. But this is my personal story because it's my drum. This is Puckmas. They call him wild man of the sea, but that's not what Puckmas means. Some people say it means half drowned. It's someone that was lost at sea, drowned at sea. And he's like the ocean counterpart to this man of the forest. Same in look, except he's got some waterlogged looking features. When I was a little boy, 3 years old, I distinctly remember the incident. I drowned in Barkley Sound. We were at a summer fishing camp there, my father. And I drowned, and I was brought from the sea by my older brother to the shore, and between him and an older sister, they brought me back to life. And that's what Puckmas in part means. So this is a portrait of me, and this looks like feathers and that, but it's not. I remember when I was drowning, I was sinking without panic or struggle. I was in bliss. I was looking up and I could see the sun shining down through the water. It's the sun rays, and it was beautiful. That's my last memory of that. That's what that represents. Wow. I would, as well as that drawing, do drawing over and over. And if you're doing the same thing, when you're going to I do that. I'll do some drawings, whether it's going to be a headdress or a drum or a rattle. I'll do some drawings, work out the idea, do that, and also go out into the world, because this stuff, like this is in New York City. There's things in New York City. There's things in Victoria, Vancouver museums, Chicago. Go there and look and be with these things. Study them, but just being near them, it'll feed you. It'll give you something. But go see them. Go visit them. Study as much as you can. I've done it for 50 years now. My daughter and I went 3-4 years ago to New York and Chicago, because she's really interested in learning this and studying it and cataloging it. And you could probably get a grant to do that. There's grants available to do that. You could probably do that. I just went and did it, and will continue to do it. I've been to museums and overseas, and anywhere that I'll find this stuff, I'll go there, study it. Take your time. a lot of artists, you know, I'm not gonna tell other artists about what they're doing, you know, critique it and stuff like that, because it's none of my business. But
Can I ask you right there? Can I ask you right there though?
Yeah.
Like just for a moment, like me as a student,
yeah,
when I feel like I've gone the long way around. I've had to study and study and study, and someone has the body of creativity that you've done over the half a century more, that's when I feel like as a student, I want some input, I want some guidance. I have a thick skin, so I'm, at least for me personally, I'm not going to get offended or hurt. I'm going to be thankful for things that are going to be shared. So I'm here today hopefully and being thankful that you're sharing this. So I guess I'm asking.
well, I can tell someone that wants to learn about the older things, I can help them with that. But when they're doing their own thing, I can leave them alone or encourage them to do what they're doing. Because that was, you know, even though over the centuries these were developed from these stages that I pointed out, there's also a lot of things out there that's old, that's really bad, and almost unidentifiable. The only thing we look at is, oh, it was collected at Tla-o-qui-aht, oh, it was collected at Nuu-chah-nulth. You know, luckily someone wrote that down. But looking at it, you couldn't tell, wow, what the heck is this? Because it's badly made. The person wasn't as refined a carver as a carver that made, you know, some of these other things. And that's always been that way. There's been professional, gifted carvers, and then there were people that were not, but they were asked to do it maybe, or they wanted to do it, whatever, but they did it, and they used it in the culture. So it stands to reason that, you know, why should that be now? Like someone who's doing something that, what, you know, this doesn't look like traditional stuff. I said, well, so what? You know, like so what? Robert Davidson were the Haida. 20 years ago, I remember him sitting in one of the galleries in Vancouver. He said, when does, because they were talking about contemporary, oh, this is contemporary, this is contemporary. He said, when does contemporary become traditional? And, you know, that was a decent question, a real question.
I had someone say, one of my pieces there, oh, that's not traditional, eh? And I'm like, well, you tell me when's traditional start. I said, is this from a book that you were getting this information from? So let's say that photograph you're looking at is 100 years old. What if that was made 101 years ago?
Some of the differences between now and the old days were that things were made for use in the old days and need and a use. It was part of them, this moving culture, and now a great part of the things being made now are made not for the culture but for sale. A lot of things are made for gallery and non-native use. So the difference between tradition and not, say, well, it's not traditional if it's not within a tradition. I guess somebody could make that argument.
So as you were beginning, you totally reminded me of old mom and old dad, that you were asking that formal permission, that, and these weren't, and as you touched on and spoke about, these weren't displayed like this. They were put to rest, and not until they were going to be woken up and used in the ceremony. That's when
I've seen it done. The old timers are gone. Luckily, when I was a young man, most of the old timers in my life, they died in the 80s. Like Uncle Dan David, my orator, died in the 80s. My father died in the 70s. My mom in millennium. But luckily, I was around them from childhood to my young man, and luckily with them in traditional setting like potlatch, where it's real now. You know, say it's real now, where you get glimpses of the life of these things, the place of these things. In tradition, these were kept in specific storage boxes, and a specific person in the family was the caretaker of them. I have seen these people take it out of the box and put it on a dancer's head, and that dancer dances it. When it comes back, that person takes it off and then puts it away. It wasn't,
No one else touched it.
no one else touched it. And when it was in a dancer's possession, they handled in a specific way. The Serpent Wolf headdresses, especially the boxes, boom. In the old days, they were never flat like that. Even in the box, there was a thing under there. This was supposed to be always up. And when it was put on the head, it was pointed up. And when a dancer danced it, he made sure it was always up, dancing. Now they don't do that. Even the dancers, you'll see them looking down with those things. I cringe when I see that. They're not supposed to do that. If they saw them do that in the old days, it would have been. But that's how revered, you know, all this stuff was. And like I said, again, it belonged to the chiefs. Now you have the feeling that anybody can have these. A lot of people now they're hanging on people's walls. You have them. You have the prints. They're on T-shirts. They're on gumboots. It's on everywhere. I've even seen them on condoms. Believe it or not, these designs and stuff. But it belonged to the chiefs. It was sacred, and it was handled and cared for in that sacred manner. I'll get a little self-defensive. Way back when I first started doing this in late 60s and then into the 70s, of course there were people that say, "What the hell you doing? Making that stuff and selling that, you know, why are you selling that to the white people? They don't own that," but you know, things like that. And I said, "Oh my God." In fact, even one person said, "Man, that's cultural prostitution." I was saying, "Oh crap, oh Jesus." I had to work through that. And I was one of the first person, for instance, me and Arthur and the Hunt family, to make silkscreen prints where we did designs and we made prints and we were selling like that, and we're getting them out there. Now I said I was going to be self-defensive, and here it comes. And I didn't realize this till later, decades later, where, wow, in other words, a justification, self-justification. Oh, wow. In all honesty, I will tell you that when I first started, there was next to none of it out. Like I told you, my mom and dad only did these tourist things, these tourist little totem poles, and there was nothing traditional about it. The only thing good about it was they knew the history of the things illustrated. But through most of the 20th century, after the pretty much 20th century, 1800s, 20th century into, I started in the middle of the 20th century, maybe 1960 or so, there was our people, this is our people's identity. That's why the chiefs did it, for the people. It's our identity, our tribal identity, the family identity. And church and state knew that we got our power from this, and especially the church, but even the government, they wanted us powerless and stupid and defenseless. So they started to eliminate this from our life. They outlawed it. It was against the law to make these things and use these things. People went to jail. My dad spent time in jail for being a traditional person. So by the time I was a young man, our people were beaten and dumbed up and identityless nearly. They no longer had their traditional names. They didn't know their songs and dances. They were identityless and they were weak and lost. And then me and Ron and Tim and Arthur started putting this out there, and not just for the natives, of course, for the white as well. But by and by, these people were looking and said, wow, that's wonderful, I like it. And they were starting to identify with it. Even the white people identified. Oh yeah, I love that. I saw it was a bear. Started to identify with it. But our people started to see this, say, yeah, I'm not useless and dumb. I'm that. That's me. That's us. And the identity start to come back. The power of identification with the culture and these things, because we were producing it and we're making it available. And today, even today, it's like I said, it's now on walls and gumboots and things like that. But it's, you know, people are identifying in a proper way.
And that's just like, you know, early to more current. It evolves, as we know, and even what you touched on, the hinkitsums, the headdress, the more panel ones. Those ones were, as I'm sure you've probably shared, with how it was made in secret, and then the potlatch was done in secret, and then they were a lot of times burned so that they wouldn't get incarcerated or killed.
Yeah.
So that's part of the evolution, and so this is where we're at today, and this is part of it, keeping it moving, keeping it. That's just my opinion and my view.
I have a piece at home that I was thinking of bringing, and I should have, but it was influenced by one that belonged to my mother's father, George Hamilton George. His name was Wamish. Had chieftain lineage and things, and he had one of those things that were made to burn, and I call them protest piece or renegade piece. When potlatches were outlawed and people were jailed and the stuff was confiscated, our people actually took in protest what they called white man materials, apple boxes, fruit boxes, board, and made it into that wolf flatboard headdress, and then they nailed tin from cans and things for the eyes and the teeth, and then the cedar bark, where it would be cedar bark, it was rope, hemp rope, and where there was feathers, they tied dollar bills, paper money for feathers, into these headdresses. That's why we call them renegade protest pieces. And when that caretaker took it off, when the dance was over, off of that person's head, they'd take it and throw it in the fire in the middle of the house. They were all burnt. But for some reason, my grandfather didn't burn a pair, and it's in caretaking by one of my first cousins. But I made one of those. I wish I could explain better what makes this Nuu-chah-nulth and not Haida or Tsimshian or Quina, but I can't in words, but I can in example. That's why I brought these to show. When you see an untrained eye will not be able to do it, I'm sure, but a trained eye will. They'll be able to say, yeah, that's not definitely not Haida, and it's not Nuu-chah-nulth. There's a distinct difference, and even more different is, of course, the Salish people. They had less of this than the other tribes for whatever reason, but.
So, for me as a student, I would want your to share your information on, maybe an explanation of this. That to me that's a real.
Well, you'd have to ask Ronnie about that.
Okay.
Because and I'm gonna tell you, he either just made it up or he saw it on an old example.
Right. Because and then as we shared with this, like you started using this in the 70s.
That's fun. I saw it on an old piece.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
So and that's where.
It was one of the first shapes, actually.
And I've been starting
And
to use that.
there's other things that are really northern, but look at this. I don't know how old this is, but this is. Look at that. That looks like what they call the salmon trout's head.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's a continuing ribbon line. It starts, it turns around the train like that. And that's, So there's, I think, always been that. But like I said, it's more free. It's free of the structure of the northern style.
And that's what I was just sharing, my description to try and still get words of Nuu-chah-nulth is.
Also in Nuu-chah-nulth, you will see the outline of the creature that it represents, where that's clearly a whale. This is clearly the Thunderbird body and the wings, clearly the Thunderbird body was clearly the wolf whale. Whereas the northern, where they have the ovoids, it was not so clear.
Right.
It's the form wasn't as defined as the Nuu-chah-nulth art is.
Right.
And my teacher, like I said at the beginning, they probably, when they had this wall to paint, like this panel, they just stepped up to the board with their brush and paint and said, I want my bird here. And my whale is going to be here. And it was fluid and beautiful because they were fluid and beautiful.
And like you shared, they lived it. They lived it.
They lived it.
Yeah. It's not like today, like, we drove here in vehicles.
This is a wren. Nuu-chah-nulth art is really gentle and subtle. Real subtle forms, gentle forms. Balance, there's harmony and balance. There's harmony and balance, and a lot of people even and maybe especially as those northern guys, that there's three colors in our two-dimensional forms, black, red, and blue. Primarily, black will be the first color, primary color. Red is a secondary color, and the blue or green is the third color, tertiary color. And when they do a design, they don't just, okay, this is my Thunderbird. This is black. I should make this one red. Those old timers, the black and red, those three colors were balanced, just like the shapes were balanced. There's a lot of things now that there's no balance. There's no balance in.
This is one thing that I really love about Nuu-chah-nulth is just like how this fine line, and then it goes to a bolder, and then back to a fine.
And it's really representative of the ovoid. The ovoid, northern ovoid, is that way. It's thin at the bottom and it's thick at thick at the top. And that's why I said it's basically calligraphy. Calligraphy is thick and thin. Yeah. It's calligraphy.
So after 50 years, it's still better just to show and point out, and whoever is able to absorb and retain.
Right. I can tell you, I can only encourage you and anybody else to go out there and do your homework. Go do your studying, doing your practice. I can't make you a great artist. There's nothing I could do to make you a good artist or a great artist. Only you can do that. That's why I said I was always it's one of my greatest gifts, that I was always my hardest critic. A lot of people will make something and they'll please themselves right off. Ooh, that's great. And then they'll show it to someone and they'll say, oh yeah, that's really nice. And they'll settle for that and they'll never develop, they'll never grow. But me, when I see something, no, even today, I'll do something, oh shit, I missed the mark. I would never do that again. Today, after all these years, I'm still there.
I was shaping a moon mask, and it was getting close, but then I put it down and I worked on a number of other things. I came back to it like 6 months later, and I just looked at the lips, and I was like, oh, they weren't right. So I shaved them all down and reshaped it, and then same with the nose to try and have it just softer, and I don't know.
I have burned things and cut things up and thrown things away, rather than have to live with, or I'll have anyone else live with it. I've destroyed it if I wasn't satisfied. Yeah. If I wasn't satisfied with it. It's practice. Some of the things that some of the advice I can give is, for instance, a lot of people go wrong. A lot of people go wrong in a specific place, and that's the transition between the nose and then the cheek area here.
The nose is what I've been really struggling. The nose and the lips were, and I'm sure this I need to work on more, but yeah, that transition there and the roll is what I've really been studying. When I was in the museums, I took photographs of every angle, just slightly adjusted.
I need to do more of this older style where you have these definite planes. Sometimes to learn, you have to destroy and undo what you think you have learned so far. Yeah. Especially if you find yourself at a dead end. So, oh, geez, what the hell's going on? You have to just destroy it and start over.
So, like this one, with a little bit of the convex, the orb shape, I noticed on a number of your pieces that you've done that, and they're a little bit more angled down in compared to this style. And did you develop more of that, or is it you pulled that from an old piece?
Well, there's old pieces like that, but every piece, like this piece, represents a specific person.
Right.
I'm going to do whatever is in front of me.
Because it's still your hand. Yeah, that's what it comes down to as well. It's your hand.
Because it's not like this here. My son's got an orb development here. Yeah. But like I said, this represents a decapitated head like this does. Right. And that's what this. There's old ones like this, the decapitated head carved in 18th century that have that. Because it represents a specific person, where these are more, you would say, what, abstract? Right. Where it's...
yeah, angular. And there's one in Germany I was looking at, and it had the scalp attached to the hair that was on that mask. I didn't touch it because it just didn't feel right to touch it, but it had two different colored hair. Because to me, it looked like it was two different scalps on what I was guessing that it's depicting a revered ancestor.
There's these guys, well, like I said, it's specifically for me, Tla-o-qui-aht. There's a number of these things. You can even see it on this old piece here where it's reminiscent of that. But once I mastered that style, which comes in this form, these face masks, once I've mastered that, then I can do anything with it. Like I can make it small, and I can even flatten it. I can stretch it, but it's still, you can see that they're related.
Sure.
Scale doesn't matter.